I feel like was this when Moon Monday actually started, Jatan? Because you mentioned having these different places on the moon that would have been of interest to the scientific community. But I feel like, was this when you realized that the moon is so diverse in terms of what it has to offer, and we need to, I mean, personally, you would like to explore what each part has to offer. So how did Moon Monday emerge
Absolutely.
from there?
Absolutely, yeah. So the original version of Moon Monday absolutely totally came out of here. You're correct on that. So since I was, researching places on the moon anyway as part of my job, I was like, okay, let's blog about it as well. At least the scientific parts of it. So that's where the idea came into be. And the other thing that was driving that was I was just fascinated by those geological landforms, because for me it changed what the moon was.
Hmm.
For all this time, even though I've been saying that I've been interested in space exploration since I was a child and so a student and so on, and I studied physics for the most part of my life of studying and learning space exploration, it was mostly about things beyond the moon, not as much about the moon itself.
Got it.
So when it came to the moon and when I started understanding more about the moon in particular, I was just completely, baffled and completely drawn to it, because I did not think about the complexity that it is capable of, and the big science questions that it can answer, which I learned as part of that job and as part of learning about the moon, generally speaking,
Mm.
later on. So yeah, so Moon Monday, the original version of it, absolutely came out of that. Yeah.
And was this also when you got to see that rocket launch? Uh,
Um, yeah. So this no, that was a bit later.
that was
That
okay.
was in 2019 late,
Okay.
but yeah, somewhat connected to that. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, that's interesting, right? How one particular object that you study in the solar system can give you so much information. It's almost like a synecdoche, right? Where when you
It's
find out
insane.
like one little property, you get like an understanding of almost everything. And that is what's so beautiful about
Insane.
science, right? That you find
Right.
something that's very elemental, it can actually
Right.
translate very easily. And this is not
Right.
something you see very easily in the social sciences, because there is a lot of complexity with regards to how you can take the results of a study and translate it into a larger setting, because humans are different
Correct.
in every setting, right? But in science,
Right.
if you get as foundational as you can actually prove something and then replicate it in so many other settings, right? So that is what's really beautiful about, and that's something that,
Absolutely. And
go
yeah,
ahead,
I
Jeff.
think you're spot on that. I mean, it just even in my recent learnings and writings about specific planets in the solar system and specific objects in the solar system, I've just been, constantly amazed by how sending just one mission to a particular object has completely transformed our understanding of not just that object, but also the solar system at large,
Sure.
and will do so again if an object which has not been studied so far is sent a mission to. So it's just baffling. So there's so many unanswered questions. We haven't figured out anything about the solar system yet, so to speak. It's in the very early nascent stages of it.
That's
So yeah.
interesting. So I think a lot of our listeners are going to be those, space scientists and aeronautical engineers and space communicators, just like you in the
Awesome.
future. Jatan, I'm just going to ask you one or two more questions, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but I just want to know, like, you started writing on Blogger, then you moved to Medium, and at the same time you were writing for a professional organization. How did you because I know you're doing this full time now, right? You are actually writing full time. So, how did you move from Medium to writing full time, and where did that money come from? Because I know, I mean, I really enjoy your writing, and this is something I want to push forward. Is that when you find a writer whose writing you really admire, find a way to support them financially. And I'm glad you gave me that opportunity, and I support your writing every month with a reasonable amount, but it's a small way to actually support writers that are doing good work, right? So can you just give us some insight into how from Medium you moved on to writing independently and maintaining your finances doing this?
Right. Yeah, certainly. So the it was a slow, gradual process.
Okay.
So what I did was while I was working at Team Indus,
Mm,
I was continuing my own blog on the side, although the frequency had decreased. So I was still writing on Medium on my own blog as well. But then what happened is in 2018, I got to know about this conference in India, in a city in India where it was a conference on science journalism and scientists,
mm,
and the I went to that conference where and there many of the big shot science writers and many scientists who are interested in science communication were all gathered at one place, and it was like a festival of science writing and science journalism in my head. And so I just went there out of interest, trying to know about what they wanted to tell the world there, whoever was attending there. And so that is where I met Mukund. He is the editor of the Wire Science, a popular publication in India.
mm,
Um, so it's an internet media publication, and it's very popular here. So I met the editor, and I was just talking to him. We chatted for like about 5 minutes or so, and he asked me about my background, about my work. I asked about his, and he got interested in what I had to offer. So I basically said that I would like to. I've been blogging on an amateur basis and on a professional basis very recently, and I would love to write for a publication.
mm.
So he gave me the option to write for them, and we decided on a topic, and I published my first article for a professional media publication then, and
Nice.
it was a paid piece. So it was a fully professionally done article, and then I started doing articles regularly for them. So I wrote about one article for them every month,
Wow.
and that was still freelancing. I mean, that was on the side while I had my job at Team Indus.
Okay.
And then I got published on the Planetary Society, where one of my articles was noticed by Emily Lakrawala, who used to work on at the Planetary Society at the time, and
Mm,
she's a very very popular science communicator. And so she noticed my article because I had tagged her on Twitter.
mm,
So one of my articles which I wrote was inspired by her article, so which is why I tagged her, saying
mm.
that inspired by Emily Lakrawala's article, I have written this particular article on how missions in space exploration have failed due to failure in electronics that they carry. So she read that article and she found it very interesting, and she liked it enough that she contacted me that she would like to republish it on the Planetary Society. So that's how the Planetary Society happened for the first time. And then I reached out to them a year later with another story
Mhm.
for science that we learned from Apollo missions in particular. So in particular, the origin of the moon.
Mhm.
So yeah, so they were happy to consider that story, and I wrote for them again. And then I slowly realized that I can actually do this for a living. I started pitching articles to publications, and then I slowly started writing more or less regularly for some of them. So that's when I realized that I want to do science writing professionally, uh,
Full time.
and I really enjoy doing that.
Mm,
So I thought, okay, let me quit my job and let me do this full time. So this was around late 2019
mhm.
when I had been publishing for The Wire, and I had one or two articles here and there on different publications, including the Planetary Society. So I was like, okay, let's just quit and let me do this full time. If I have all the time that I don't have now, then I would be able to write more articles and approach more publications. So that's
Right.
how it started. And fast forward to now, I'm pretty much writing, full time, uh, doing science writing full time for publications,
That's
and
really
doing more things of my own.
That's interesting because you have multiple sources of income, and because you've started writing for a global audience, you have consumers, I mean, people that want to read your work internationally as well, right, Jatan? That's interesting that the internet actually opened up your market in terms of who would want to read your work. And I think
Right.
that is something that is important to note here, is that you can use the internet as a tool. What I also got
Mm.
from that conversation, Jatin, is that you were able to tap into knowledge networks, whether it's the science conference, the science journalism conference. Like you met Mukund there, and that opened up this opportunity. Similarly, you used another network, which is Twitter, and you send that tweet out to this person, but you backed it up with some valuable data. And that's the thing,
Right.
when we reach out to a professional, we think that they just have to help us without us providing something valuable in return. But you were able to write something building on her earlier piece, which opened up that connection. So that is
Right.
actually really insightful. And I know, like, this is something I'd like to push forward, and I wouldn't want you to, like, if you are interested in, supporting Jatan as a freelance writer, you can go to his blog, which I will link below, and you can support him on a website called Patreon, where you can contribute a small amount, and that will help him continue writing independently.